Erin, I am so grateful you are here with me today. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you.
This is going to be great. I saw you on Instagram because I saw a clip of your podcast and we interviewed, we had mutual guests, Whitney and Deb, and I started binge watching your clips. And I was looking at all these great guests and listening to the conversations. And what happened was I was really enthralled with you. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's the host. I wonder if she would come talk to me about all these things that she's sharing with everyone else through these guests. And when I reached out to you, I have to be honest, I was so excited and honored that you said yes. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. And this is how it works these days, right? You go towards the things that you're attracted to, and the internet makes it so easy to reach out to people, and we need to be here and support each other in midlife, you know?
Absolutely. And I think women in their, especially like 40s, 50s, 60s, we have a lot in common. Whether it was you and I both single, I was a single mom, just like
Hmm.
you are, all these different like jobs leading up to the creative side.
Hmm.
There's so many things that women are going through. It's not necessarily all the same, but it's really similar. I'd love to know more about Erin in the background, like way back. What was little Erin like? What was your childhood like? What were you like as a child and teenager?
Oh, okay. We'll go right there.
We're digging
We'll go
in
to the,
quick.
the superhero origin story. Forged in Fire. I was a child of divorce. My parents split when I was 2 or 3. So I spent my life going back and forth between my mom's house, where I was during the week, to my dad's, where I went on the weekend. I'm my mother's only child. My father remarried and had a second child when my brother was born when I was 10 and a half. So he was like my baby. But during that stretch of time, I got a lot of time with adults and a lot of time alone because I was a latchkey kid. My mom was a working mom. She was a feminist. She was an activist. And yeah, I was required to be very independent from a very early age. And I think, like a lot of kids, especially girls who didn't quite get the attention they wanted, I decided I wanted to be an actress.
I love it.
I wanted to be Annie in Annie. I was very tall. And I was not a little cutie patootie. I was, by the time I was in 5th grade, I was 5'4". So I was always like Auntie and never Dorothy. You know what I mean? I was never the ingenue. And I think that's a good metaphor for me. Like I think I was like old before my years, wise before my years in the way that like a lot of kids who have to deal with adult situations too young become. So yeah, I think when I look back, I have so much tenderness for my child self and the reason I had 2 kids, instead of only one, is because I really spent too much time on my own. But that helped me to develop a very rich inner life. So I was always reading. I watched a lot of TV. I relied on sitcoms to get me through the afternoon after I got home from the bus, before my mom got home from work. And I was always sort of chasing the attention of being in plays and being on stage and really like did that all the way through school and ended up going to college and being a theater major. So I thought I would be an actor, but I carried a burden of like this feeling of not being good enough in a lot of ways. And it really showed up in my body image, my relationship with my appearance. And unfortunately, there was a lot of scrutiny on me as a kid around that stuff. And it created some narratives that's taken me really my entire life to unpack, where, I was weighed and I was made to exercise and I was sent to Weight Watchers and I was sent to nutrition. My body was made a problem. And so there's that like awful dichotomy that happens a lot with young women, which is look at me, don't look at me. So I was like, just come celebrate me. I'm going to be in a show, but also like, am I too fat to even exist? Like I really had a lot of that. And then I carried that with me into my life as a young actor. And it was really hard for me to audition. I just was like, who are you on the other side of the table to judge me? And yet, please approve of me. Please tell me I'm good enough, talented enough, pretty enough. Please prove I exist. There was a lot of that for me in terms of a push and pull in my life. And, fast forward to my late 20s when I stopped acting. I stopped acting because I was producing everything I was involved with. And I was like, I think that's a job. I thought, oh, maybe I could find a career if I just went more towards the things that came naturally to me than doing this thing that I had assigned myself that was like what was going to prove I was going to be successful, which was, being a working actor, which I got close. I got a Mad TV audition, I got a Daily Show audition, but I never booked. I never got callbacks because I was too self-conscious. I was too in my head. I cared too much what you thought. So yeah, I think that's like a basic story of my childhood. I was very close to my mom. Spending time at my dad's on the weekend was very hard. He's a super charismatic guy, but, not the nurturing sort of child-focused parent I would have wanted. Yeah, that's a conversation for my therapist every week. Yeah, so that's my childhood. I was raised in Baltimore. I went to prep school, had what I now reflect on as a tremendous amount of educational privilege. I was my mom's only child, and she's the youngest of 3 by a long shot. Like the sister that was older than her was 13 years older, and then the other sister was 16 years older. So I was the baby of the baby. And that was sort of my place in the family, the youngest of all the cousins.
I love this background, and I know that it created so many things in you.
Mhm.
And I want to share that I came from divorce also, and
Mhm.
so many things hit home for me.
Mm.
And I think for women, even if they are not coming from a family of divorce, when there is any kind of person who's not emotionally available, not physically available, we have a lot of the same feelings, and it manifests itself in so many ways. It could be not good enough, it could be looking for that attention.
Mhm.
You did it in acting. I think I spent more time chasing down the guys like in college,
Mm.
always looking for that relationship, looking to be liked, looking to be loved. I can feel it when you're talking about it.
Yeah.
But something else that I thought was really interesting, kind of the feminist having to be independent, because I think a lot of us were raised with moms that were like, you don't need a man, because we did have a lot of divorce. You don't need a
Yeah.
man. You can take care of yourself. You need to be self sufficient.
Yeah.
And coming from a mom who went back to work,
Mhm.
getting divorced, and a dad who had been a Marine and then other law enforcement, it was, you take care of yourself, you take care of your business.
Mhm.
So, wow, I'm really fascinated. I'd love to know more too about the body image and how you felt around not feeling good enough in that area when you went into producing and you went into these other parts of your life that we'll talk about. Did anything change? Did it get worse? How did that move along in your life with every step?
I mean, it has been like the constant narrative of my life, my relationship with my body. And I am so happy to say that for today at 53, I feel good in my skin. I take better care of myself than I ever have. But I really let this story develop that unless I was a certain way, unless my body was a certain size, unless I looked a certain way, then I was not worthy of love. That was really the story that I had to be someone's fetish or someone's kink or someone's particular taste, and that narrowed the pool of my date men, so, like, of the men who would be interested in me. And I will say that I tried every different diet and also every different approach to thinking about my body. In high school, one of the defining moments I was that I went on a liquid diet. Like a lot of people at that time, I graduated in 1989. So that was like all the craze for weight loss. So for 5 months or so, I didn't eat anything and I lost like 60 pounds. And I was so thin. Literally never been that thin. I was never that thin before, and I've never been that thin since. People treated me like I was a hero. And I remember a girl who was a year younger than me in school coming up to me in the like senior hallway and being like, "You'll never go back. You'll never go back again. That's so amazing. Good for you." And in my head, I was like, "Of course I'll go back. Like, I don't know how to keep this weight off, and I don't know how to be this person. And also, I was anemic and I didn't get my period for a year, but nobody cared about that. Nobody in my life cared about that. They just cared that I was a socially acceptable size and that I was in a body that they liked and that they found more approvable. So, in college, I definitely went on a grow my leg hair, fuck the patriarchy, wearing overalls and combat boots and thrift store clothes and bleaching my hair shittily. And, just I have a very punk rock streak in me. I have a rebellious vibe in my heart. That is, I resonate with the rebels. I don't look like one, but those are my people. And, that felt good to me at the time because I was like rejecting this notion of conformity and rejecting the values that I had been raised by. I relished wearing thrift store clothes and ripped up things because it made my mom so incensed. In high school. That was my teenage rebellion, was like how I dressed. I had pink hair, I wore like an infinite number of necklaces, just rings on every finger.
You
Just
were the rebel. It's
yeah,
great.
prep school rebel. I mean, definitely, but also always got good grades, always turned in my home, always was respectful. Oh, but ran all the activist groups in high school, like, ran the Amnesty International group, started this thing called Friends for Peace. I had a lot of energy for my own self-determination.
Nice. Moving through this phase, now the acting is done. And how
Okay,
did
so I
you
get through
get
my
to, yes,
20s. We get through
yeah.
my 20s, which I really tried to be an actor. And I was in a sketch comedy group and I did one person shows. And like, I just was bad at auditioning, but I was really good at making a thing. I was really good at putting a team of people together and being like, okay, let's pick a date on the calendar. Let's rent the theater. And then let's use that as a forcing function to make a show. And I was always the ringleader with those things, my improv group, with my sketch group, with whatever make 'em up festival of one person show excerpts, like whatever. And I had moved to New York at that point and was just sort of, I always say I spent 15 years in a basement theater. Like those are my bona fides for show business, that like I was either making work or I was watching other people's
Wow.
work.
How did you transition out of that? Because you've had other jobs before starting Hotter Than Ever.
Yes. I mean, when I got out of college, all my friends and I wanted to move to the West Coast. And so we lived in San Francisco, which was where the internet was born the moment we were there. And so the only jobs, it was a recession, there were no coffee shop jobs. The only jobs were at these tech startups. And so I found myself in my 20s writing. I was an office manager, and then I was a writer for a bunch of different tech startup companies. And I took one of those jobs with me when I moved to New York and did that remotely in a time before remote work was a thing. And I worked for various, mostly female entrepreneurs as their writer, their person who wrote responses to proposals, who helped them, write articles that they were getting published, like whatever needed to be done in that space. I knew I could write. I knew I could think. I'm very intellectually curious. So that was how I made money. I was doing that. And then I was doing that to finance my acting habit and all my training and all the shows I was producing. And then one day I was walking out of a theater on the Lower East Side and I was carrying a huge box of wigs. We were loading out from our sketch show that had been there. There was a guy I knew who was 10 years older than me. Knew him kind of from the scene. And he was walking down the steps with his box of wigs. And I had the thought, if I keep doing this, I'm going to be that. And so I don't know, you get these moments of insight in your life, you get these flashes of revelation. And so I thought, what if I tried stopping performing and tried to get a job on the inside? Like maybe I could learn, maybe I learned what a development executive is, which for people who, if your listeners don't know, that's a person who sits inside a network or a streaming platform or mobile platform, and they hear pitches from creative people, and then they put those things, if they're right for the platform, they put that to their bosses, they propose it to their bosses, and they get those things funded, and they make a pilot, and then they make a series. Like, there's the person on the inside who sort of filters through all the possible shows and then helps to make those shows. And I was like, that's a job? That sounds like a dream. And so once I learned what that was, I started to try to chase that as a career. And my first job in TV was at Comedy Central, which was a cable network and is now Lord knows what. Right.
I know that has changed quite a bit too.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you go from that job to Snapchat, or was there something in
Oh my
between?
God. I'm 53. So there are a lot of jobs in between. So I worked at Comedy Central. I worked for a producer at NBC. I worked as a consultant to BBC America, reading all the scripts that had been greenlit in the UK that year. I worked for a company that put advertiser money behind original programming, and sort of sat in that seat between the advertiser and the network and the show, which I did not like that. I don't like working in advertising. Um, and then I worked at the Independent Film Channel for 6 years. When it was rebranding into a comedy channel, they moved me out to LA. I worked for a production company for a couple years, got laid off, and then Snapchat recruited me. And I was there for 6 years because I was seeing the writing on the wall of how tech was changing media. And I thought, I think I've had the best jobs in cable that I could ever have. And then mostly focused on comedy and dramedy. Not much of a drama person. I've done unscripted and sort of every genre, but my true love is what's funny. And sad funny is like my jam.
That's great.
Yeah, so that's how I got to Snap. And then I got laid off from there after 6 years in 2022. And I was so burnt out. I was so burnt out from having chased this career, from having been, the best little executive you could ever be, Miss Superstar, A+ overachiever. I had twins in the middle of all that. I did, fertility treatments and IVF. And, when I got laid off from Snap, everything changed. And everything had started to change the year before because I got sick with COVID and went to the hospital and had kind of another epiphany moment 2 weeks before my 50th birthday, where I realized that one day I was going to die. It never occurred to me before then. And my then husband picked a fight with me as he was coming to pick me up from the hospital, where I had been having silent contemplation for 2 or 3 days, which had never happened in my life for a decade since my kids were born. And I thought, this is not how this is supposed to be. So within 6 months, he had moved out. And then 6 months later, I got laid off. And I kind of got this blank slate in my life. And I thought, okay, well, who do I want to be when I grow up? Like maybe it's time for that. Maybe it's time to go back to some of the things I was chasing in my late 20s that I put aside to be an adult with a capital A and have a career, call it a capital letter life, like, to have a career with a capital C, and a family with a capital F. Like I really wanted all the things. So I spent 20 years chasing the things. I got the things, and then it all kind of fell out. And I was like, And I've been in that moment for 3 years now.
I think a lot of women are feeling that. We feel like we can do all the things because we've been taught that we should be able to do all the things. But then when we get some of the things that we want, it's too much. And the burnout that you talked about is real. It really is real. I think one of the most beautiful things that you went through, even though it was such a rocky path at the end with the COVID there, is having that contemplation. We don't stop. And I remember times when, I got remarried, blending a family, working, trying to be super mom, super stepmom. Kids are going back and forth, trying to be, clean the house and keep up with the job. I had a wonderful moment where I thought, you know what? I don't need to get the A anymore. I'll get that
My
B. And I've
God.
had that conversation with somebody else on another podcast where we said, what in the world why do I still have to be the good girl, the high achiever, and always be a number one? And it's funny because you said you were an only child for so long. I was the firstborn.
Mhm.
So, firstborn girl,
Eldest
and
daughter, forget
everything,
it.
yeah, everything fell. I'm really curious about this because you've had these amazing high powered jobs. People like hear them and they can kind of relate, even if they don't know exactly what you were talking about. Even acting, people know what that is.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of when I was in corporate, got an MBA, did the whole corporate thing.
Hmm.
Then I decided to be at home with the kids for a while when I was married to my first husband. Everybody knows what all that is, kind of in their mind. And then I went back to school and became a high school math teacher for a while.
Hmm.
Everybody knows what that is. So the identity that I had with each of those was pretty clear and it felt important and it felt big. And then I decided to ditch all that and become a health coach, podcast host. And people are like, what exactly are you doing? Do you
Hmm.
ever feel like as you've transitioned out of that into a more creative role where you do get to blossom creatively, that there's kind of a weird identity
Well, I'm
shift
in the
there?
middle of a really weird identity crisis. I am deep in it. I'm also in the middle of trying to figure out, like, I made a lot of money in my last career, and I have yet to figure out how to monetize what I'm doing because I know I have a brand, I know I have a vision, I know I have a voice and a point of view. I know what I'm good at in this new space that I'm exploring, but I have had people say to me, like, you're selling the sizzle, but what is the steak? Like, what is the burger? The burger normally is coaching, workshops, some kind of marketing funnel that you're leading people down in order to sell something at the end of it. And I'm like, I'm a media maker. Like that is my vision, that like what Hotter Than Ever, the podcast, represents is telling the stories of women in midlife and talking about all the things we don't talk openly about and providing an opening for people to just breathe and say, you know what? I do not have to do this according to somebody else's rules anymore. That I can break the rules, that I can figure out what a life of my own design with the rules that I decide for me is going to be right. We have been climbing an escalator for 20 years, where you go, oh, I want all the adult things. In my 20s, in my teens, I was a rebel. I was free to do that. That's great. But I wanted a home and I wanted a husband and I wanted children and I wanted a career and I wanted all the things you're supposed to want. Okay, I got all those things. It took me a really long time to get them. And then you arrive at the top of that escalator and there's no map and there's no plan and there's no guidebook. Especially because technology has disrupted every business and because women are getting divorced in droves. 73% of divorces are initiated by women these days. We are all looking around and going, we are the most successful generation of women who have ever lived on planet Earth. We have grown to have some expectations about how our lives should be and feel. Our estrogen is dropping, and so we no longer care to accommodate other people over ourselves. That's just a function of the estrogen drop. Okay, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? What do I care about? Where do I want to put my fucks? People say, I have no fucks left to give. I have so many fucks to give. I just really only want to put them where I believe they belong, in my kids, in my community. in men who, are varying degrees of commitment or not. Like I'm trying an experiment around my love life, which is different than how other people do it. Like, I'm not trying to get remarried. I don't understand how you did a blended family. I think I would die. I really do.
I was close.
I do not aspire to that. I aspire to them getting through high school, which they will start next year, and then I will figure out what I want to do, and how I want to do it. But for now, it'd be nice to have a boyfriend. In the absence of boyfriends, I have lovers, and that's great for me, because I was in a sexless marriage. So that's a rediscovery. That's a coming back to myself and my body. I am really just trying to give myself and other women permission to invent a life that is what they want, maybe for the first time, you know, and to not so hold so tightly to whatever they think they're supposed to be doing, because there's no map. There's no
No.
map.
And there's so many stories. Our stories come so, they run so deep from our past. And
Hmm.
we take those stories and we run with them as if they are real and true right now.
Mm.
And I love how you dropped the bomb about the estrogen, because it's true. When that estrogen drops, you're surprised all of a sudden why you say what's on your mind, but it's a physiological fact that estrogen helps. And I think it's a combination of really not wanting to do the same thing over and over and over
That's
again.
right.
I think what's curious to me too is I grew up as very much a people pleaser
Hmm.
and did not have a good boundary set up with a lot of situations in my life. And when I recognized that people pleasing is not being kind,
No, it isn't.
then I woke up, and I think a lot of women in our age group really grew up that way. They were taught you really need to take care of other people. You really need to do this for other people. You have to have the manners, and you have to have everything. I my poor kids with the thank you notes and everything, just making sure everything was, we got to make sure everybody knows we're grateful.
Yeah.
As I'm yelling at them, we're grateful. And
Be
but
grateful. Yeah.
yes, you are. Finish that note and write more than a sentence. But I think that we're coming into a new age where we understand now that saying no is self preservation, saying no is self love, and saying no, even how we treat our bodies and what we do, saying no is helping us live and rebirth. So I'd love to know, are you in a space where you're saying no more? You're putting boundaries up? Are you keeping and letting go of people? What are you going through?
Yeah. Sometimes all I can access is the no. Sometimes all I can access, like this past year, and really even to this very moment, like in my mind and in my bank account, I'm going, Erin, you probably should just try to get a job. Like, you should get a job. Like, maybe do this as a hobby on the side. Like, maybe this dream is going to take 10 years. So it's I mean, and I'm not saying tomorrow I wouldn't necessarily take a job, because I will need one in 5 minutes. But all I can access around that right now is no, no, I don't want to. I don't want to. And I can't tell sometimes whether that's just me being a stubborn brat, or whether that is like the way that I am designed to respond to the current circumstances, so that I will make enough room for the right opportunities to come in. Because I know that when I have a job, I'm not a like half-hearted person. I'm like very intense and driven, and I don't like to take things on that I don't mean and that aren't meaningful to me. I don't actually know how to do that. I don't actually know how to be casual in my pursuit of things. And so I can get real clear about the no. And sometimes the best that can happen is it's not a no. It may not be a yes, but my therapist is like, that's not a no,
That's
because the
great.
no is really loud. I am working really hard on boundaries with my ex-husband. That is a really ongoing challenge. And he is mad at me a lot of the time around the boundaries that I set. And I don't really care. Like, I don't need him to like me or, I just don't, I need it to be amicable enough that it doesn't upset my kids. But I'm so committed to not taking care of him anymore. And he would have me take care of him for the rest of his life in one way or another. And I'm not in that business anymore. So like I'll delete texts he sends. Like he sends it and sends something that he's trying to be provocative and I'll write okay and then just delete.
Do you know how powerful that is,
It
though?
feels so
Women,
good.
yes, women need to hear this because we are in an age where somebody texts you, you feel, or emails you, you feel obligated to write back. And you feel obligated to write back right away and have a response.
Be
And
thoughtful or let a
yes,
tactful,
yes.
diplomatic.
And we are letting things in that are not necessary. And I think I tell my kids this too, when you break up with someone, watching them on social media and not blocking them is really hurting your
Well,
emotional
I've
and
blocked
mental
him.
health.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not interested.
It's really powerful, though, for women to hear that you don't have to respond. I think that's really important. We feel like we have to respond to everything in life, not just people. We feel like we are on fire to respond to everything, and we can just sit back, take some time, take a minute. I really appreciate you talking about very vulnerably where you are with even just like what's going to happen with my finances. Should I take this job? And I appreciate that you can say no to that when we are.
It might be
Yes.
stupid. Like,
Well,
honestly, it might be stupid. Like my defiance might not be very helpful for me in this moment, but I don't know how to be a different way. I guess if I was more desperate, or when I'm more desperate, I hope that's not a self-fulfilling prophecy, but if I was more desperate, maybe I would do something differently, but I keep being like, I have a couple more months.
and what
It's
is
not enough
coming
time.
out, yes, what is coming out on this podcast is so important. And I think that there is, everybody else, like you said, has the funnel. We're all selling something, we're all coaching, but the power of that free content to be who you are and be authentically yourself and listen in on conversations about that. I would love to also switch gears for just a second. You mentioned and I believe it was the one with Deanna on being stuck in one of your
Yeah.
podcasts. That was so good. But you mentioned your own struggles with eating. And I was curious because a lot of our listeners are in for the emotional eating part of it. They're in
Yeah.
for they've been diet. We've all been dieting. I dieted for probably 30 years, maybe. It was about 30 years on and off. It's so funny you mentioned 1989, the liquid diet. My mom went on it, and I went on something crazy. I'm embarrassed to even say, but my roommate was just eating baked potatoes and losing weight because we worked at a
Sure.
restaurant. We got free baked potatoes. That's
Uh-huh.
all she ate. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to do that because I went to college, gained the freshman 15, which
Sure.
everybody thinks it's just because the food's junky, it's crappy, you get to eat whatever you want. But as a 17, 18-year-old going off to college by yourself, all of a sudden you have agency over everything and you have to have discipline to do everything. Mental health wise, I was not really good. And that's when I first started super coping with food
Yeah.
and just eating it all just to really feel better. That
Right.
was better to me than even going out with everybody and having a beer. And I remember this guy says to his friend after he broke up with me, my old girlfriend had a better body than Kim. And that was the kickoff right there to a lot of stuff that happened after that. And I was just curious with the things that you've gone through. Do you feel like there's a lot of women that aren't speaking about the disorderedness of their eating, or do you think it's coming out more and more? What do you think is happening? Because our age group has gone through a lot with that.
I think so. I mean, I will say that whatever approach you could have to food, diet, body image, I've done it. Like, for years, I was like, I don't weigh myself. I don't judge myself. My body is what it is, like body acceptance, like, okay, so I carry extra pounds, fuck you if you judge me. Like, again, the rebel, right? And then I would be on an every 10-year weight loss thing. Like every decade, I would lose 60 pounds or something like that, you know? And no, really, by the time it was like I had done it for the third time, I knew that it would climb back up but I had sort of decided when I had my kids, I had twins, I gained a bunch of weight. When they were born, I lost a bunch of weight because they came out and I was breastfeeding for a minute. And then I gained 35 pounds in the first year of their life or 6 months. I mean, I was so overwhelmed that all I could do was listen to the cookies talking to me in the cabinet. Don't eat those Tate's chocolate chip cookies, the greatest, most poisonous, delicious things that have ever been made. Those were my trigger food. And I remember picking a fight with my husband. 4th of July weekend, we were having a barbecue. I was too fat to have a barbecue. That's how I felt. I was too fat to exist, even though I was a mom of twins and I was in my dream job and I had gone back to work really soon because our maternity leave sucked. And I was just trying to do everything. And my solution to everything was eating. And I got really mad at him and I said, I have to go to Overeaters Anonymous. I yelled at him about it. And he's like, okay, why are you yelling at me? I'm like, I don't know. I did not want to go to Overeaters Anonymous because for me, it was the last house on the block. Like AA for alcoholics, NA for drug addicts, GA for gambling addicts. It's there, right? And so I walked into those rooms and spent 7 years in that program. And that program, not only did I lose a shit ton of weight right away just by following what a nutritionist told me to do, but it gave me community, it gave me honesty, it gave me a mechanism to get underneath all the stories, working the 12 steps, having sponsors, having sponsees. I went to 3 meetings a week for 7 years and it changed my life. It changed my brain. It changed my body. And then the second I got this enormous job, I just couldn't do that and parent twins and manage my marriage. And so, and then gradually my weight started to go up again. And I thought, well, that's it. I either have to go back to OA or I just have to deal. I just have to accept, my eating wasn't as disordered after OA. I wasn't eating as compulsively. I was able to stay on relatively normal 3 meals a day and a couple snacks. I was able to manage it pretty well because I learned some really good skills in that program. But I am once a compulsive overeater, always a compulsive overeater. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. It's the same stuff, except the stories are less sexy. You don't get partying stories. You get, then I closed the blinds and ate the ice cream. Sad.
I get it. Yeah, I was watching Netflix and I cleaned out my pantry. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I was watching everybody lose weight on weight loss drugs and judging the shit out of them and being like, I can't believe they're going to take that cheap path out. They're going to go the easy road. How is that going to affect them for their lives? And then I thought, wait a minute. Maybe it's a solution. Maybe it's a path for me. I don't want to carry extra weight. I don't want to be uncomfortable in my body. I had started exercising once I got separated. I had started doing Pilates. I was taking much better care of myself once there was space to do that. So I decided to go on weight loss drugs. And I've been doing that since last March. And I've lost about 30 pounds. And I feel amazing. And I have a really different relationship with food where I'm indifferent to it for the first time in my life. And I'm like, is this what thin people feel like? They're the people who forget to eat. I never missed a meal in my entire life.
Can't relate.
No, I could not relate. But it has been incredible for me just to be relieved of that conversation. But I'll just say that my weight, food, body image stuff accompanied me through every single phase of my life and was running in parallel. And I had so many assumptions about like what was possible for me at different sizes, professionally, romantically. Like, I wouldn't have moved to LA from New York if I hadn't been thin at that time. Like, I just thought, well, you can't be fat in LA. I won't be successful. And it may actually be true.
That's really interesting. First of all, thank you so much for sharing and being so open and vulnerable with your journey. I'm so glad that you did get tools from OA, and
Yeah,
especially that they
huge.
go into the stories, not just their methods and the 12 steps, but really getting into that story. I also love that you brought up the weight loss drugs because, okay, as a holistic health coach, of course,
I'm sure
trying
you
to get people
you
to
have all
quit
kinds
dieting.
of
I'm like,
feelings
at
about them.
first I was like, oh my gosh, they're just, this is going to ruin people. They're going to go off. They can't deal with it. They don't know what to do. There were so many things, quick fix. It all went through my head. But the beauty of being 58 years old is that I see everything from multiple sides now. And I just dug in, really looked at it. And I think it's one of the most incredible things for some people because the food, and this is a little trendy term, but the food noise is real. And when there's nothing like, for the first time in your life, not having cravings for sugar and carbs the way that people who have disordered eating have those cravings.
I still want sugar, but I can have it because I'm eating so much less that like, and also, I mean, I still have some compulsion around like something that's like a pure sugar thing, like a Werther's candy these days. That's like if I can't find the sugar free, I will get the sugar ones. And then the bag's gone in a day, like I'm still the same person, weirdly, but I'm also indifferent to food largely. So it's like, okay, if 300 of my calories come from eating candy, and I can still manage to get a protein drink in and maybe make a salad with salmon every other day. Like, honestly, it's so weird. It's so weird. And I'm inclined to try to lie about it and tell you that I eat healthy because I know I have to. I eat relatively healthy, but I also know that because I don't want to eat much, I can kind of have more discretion around what I eat. In an ideal world, you would use the weight loss drugs, you would change your behavior, you would eat small, healthy meals, whatever you could manage, avoid junk, of whatever, make yourself in a pattern of better nutrition so that if and when you go off of those drugs, you're not, so you've got a good habit going. But it's so liberating to not have to be such a good girl around food and follow all the rules around food and not be punished by gaining weight for having a couple peanut butter cups. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just a really different headspace, and I really enjoy it.
We've had to say no for so many years, and the no was never no because we would give in anyway. But because that, like you said, that compulsiveness, it doesn't go away because we're always recovering. There's
Hmm.
always something that's in the back of our head because of part of the stories that we have had over the years. Those don't go away. We just have to manage them better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am not eating for comfort because it's not comforting to eat.
Right. But it is amazing how honest you can be about that, which is great because I think we're not honest with ourselves because we have been fed so many things. So that is such a great way for us to really start rounding this out because I think you're telling the truth and the authenticity that you're bringing to the table. I want every woman listening to this to start looking at, what do you want? What do you really want? Why do we have to play the rule game anymore? Obviously, we aren't going to hurt people, be unkind to people. Playing the rule game, I mean, for yourself and
Hmm.
not fitting into the box. We could have
Hmm.
a whole nother podcast on fitting into the box and the feminist masculinity, the whole 9 yards. But I would love for you to, if you could, women are just starting to wake up and starting to listen and starting to think about their own lives. If you had a few tips to get women to start asking themselves some questions, what would you want them to ask themselves?
Thanks for asking that question. I mean, we just lie so much, right? We lie so much to ourselves about being comfortable, about being happy, about the people who are in our lives, the situations that are in our lives, because we were taught to go along to get along, and that you'd rather throw yourself under the bus than make other people uncomfortable, right? So, my first thought is like, start to tune in to where you are not telling the truth in the smallest possible ways. So, maybe it's your husband's best friend who makes your skin crawl. Like, you just don't like the guy. Like, this is completely fictional, but you just don't like the guy. You don't like to be around the guy. You don't want to be around the guy. You don't like his wife, whatever. Just be honest with yourself. Like, that you don't like that person, and maybe you want to limit your exposure to that person. You know? Do you like being the school mom? Do you like being the class parent? Or you just do it because you want the cash and prizes of everybody's approval and praise? Like, where are you cultivating resentment in yourself by doing things that you don't actually want to do? Like, that can unlock a lot of freedom for you. It can also be confronting because there might be a lot there once you start to notice it. You know, what if you put your own authentic desires in front of what you think you're supposed to do? Like, in a small way, an experiment. You know what? I don't like dropping the kids off every day at school. Husband, partner, whatever. Can you handle that? You know, I don't like how the domestic labor situation is working in our home. I don't like coming home and having to do a job that I didn't sign up for, but that was assigned to me by virtue of my gender. Like, you know, I'd like to go away with my girlfriends for a weekend. I'd like to be able to not call you the second I land at the conference. Like, loosen the reins on yourself a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm using lots of specific examples from my own life, but I will say that one feeling that I had when I first got separated, that was an extraordinary feeling I didn't even know I wanted, was I was driving on the highway, I was going to a date, and I realized that no one knew where I was. And I had been in a life where for 20 years, people knew where I was, what I was doing, and when I would be back. And just the feeling of like, I'm doing what I want. I don't have to tell anyone. Like, even that tiny little moment can be a revelation. And then that can snowball into bigger things, you know, where you choose. My big message for women is you don't have to do it the way you've always done it. And it's not actually going to be possible to do it how you've always done it in this next chapter of your life. So, what can you imagine? What have you been curious about? What would you like to explore? Whether that's pottery or polyamory. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, like, sky's the limit. Sky's the limit, you know, and you're going to have to figure some stuff out because we're going to live a really long time.
We are. And I really love the advice of getting curious
Mm-hmm.
because, or even going back to old passions that you've
Mm-hmm.
given up because, again, you should be doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
So powerful. Erin, thank you so much. You have just opened a door for so many women. And I love highlighting you because your podcast, I think Hotter Than Ever is just, it's an amazing podcast. And I pray that it just keeps going.
Thank
Listen in. I love it. So I want all the listeners to find you. So please share with everyone, where can we find you?
You can find Hotter Than Ever by searching Hotter Than Ever anywhere where you can find podcasts. We're on every social media platform at Hotter Than Ever Pod. I'm going to be doing a stand-up show in LA that's only women comics over 40. I'm not performing, I'm producing. You know, there's a lot of stuff in my back pocket that is media projects and things that, you know, God willing, I'll be able to manifest. But my hope is to grow it into a brand that means freedom and fun and, you know, a self-determined life for women over 40. So if you're interested in those conversations, please come check the show out.
Yes, absolutely. And make sure you listen to the podcast.
That's what I mean.
And
The show is the
yes,
show, the podcast is the
yes.
show. Yeah.
And thank you so much for coming here and being so real, so authentic, because you are helping so many women. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. One of my new favorite podcasts, other than the Emotional Leads podcast, of course, is Hotter Than Ever with Erin Keating. Her guests are incredible and inspiring, but it's really Erin, the host, who truly captivates me. Her ability to put into words the struggles that many midlife women face, especially the ones we may not even want to admit to ourselves, it's astonishing. Welcome to episode 94 of the Emotional Leads podcast. I'm sure, like me, you'll find parts of her story deeply resonate with you. Erin has a way of making you pause and reflect on what you want for this next chapter of your life. And let's face it, ladies, we're not living less, we're living longer. And we want to shape the second half of our lives and decide what it's going to look like. But how can we do that in a way that feels authentic, freeing, and really true to ourselves without being bound by rules or other people's expectations? Your life doesn't have to look the way society thinks it should. You don't have to create it according to somebody else's vision. Erin's very deeply honest story and insights are an invitation for all of us to wake up, get curious, ask ourselves, what do you really want for the next phase of your journey? And to be honest, I was jolted and challenged by her story because she's so real and authentic and can say everything out loud. That's a space many women struggle to be in, including me. We grew up saying the things that people wanted us to say, but we do have our own voices. I'm so excited for you to hear her story. If this conversation resonates with you, reach out, let us know, and don't forget to share it with a friend who might need it too. Enjoy the episode, and we hope it inspires you to start crafting the life you truly want.